Hi, I'm Lauren. Welcome back to my craft room. Today is a new Whimsy stamps release, and to celebrate I have this fun slimline card with an interactive element, this little squirrel climbing up and down the tree. I hope you enjoy this tutorial and you check out all of the new items released today. The new products I'm using to make this card are the Slimline Cornered Rectangles die set, the Scribbles Background Rubber Cling Stamp, and the Polka Dot Pals Zachary Clear Stamps. Now I've already stamped and colored. You can freeze here to see the Spectrum Noir Illustrator markers I use to color my images, and I fussy cut out our tree, two squirrels, and our little boy sitting here. Now I had a little bit of ink blending on his skin, which is why I gave him little dirt patches like he had been playing out around in the dirt with the squirrels, and he's taking a little break and just thinking about maybe what snack he wants after he's done playing. So that's why he looks a little dirty. I thought I could disguise my smearing of my ink with little brown dirt patches. For my background, I cut some blue cardstock using one of my Slimline Cornered Rectangle dies, and I stamped the Scribbles Background Rubber Cling Stamp using my Tumbled Glass Distress Oxide ink pad, and then I'm using a blender brush just to add some additional distressing along the edge of this slimline die. And now I have a fun background. It has a blue sky with a little bit of interest because of those scribbles. I'm going to be using Distress Oxide in Broken China on my little piece of laminator sheet here, and adding in some sparkly liquid from Ink on 3, and I'm blending those together to splatter onto my background. It's still a little thick and not splattering how I want it to, so I just add a little bit of water, and now I'm going to flick that color and sparkle onto my background. And once I'm all done using up the ink on that sheet, I'm just going to pick up the excess water with a scrap piece of paper I used also for helping me stamp that slimline stamp onto that paper. Next, I'm using my Grass and Cloud Edger die set to create my grass and treetop for my tree. I love using cloud dies to also make the tree tops of trees. I think it's a fun way to use these dies in something other than clouds. And I'm just trying to figure out how I'm going to layer my characters and my trees and my squirrel just to make sure I have enough space and I have enough grass behind my little boy, and then also some grass for the tree to hide behind because I have that flat edge from trimming it or stamping it really close to the edge of the paper. So I've also die cut that same size of my Slimline Cornered Rectangle out of some green cardstock, and I'm going to place my different grasses as well as my cloud die to create different parts of green for my card. Now it is the same color green for the tree and the grass, but I'm going to add some Distress Oxide once I have those die cut. So I have my two grass pieces. First, I want to glue my larger grass piece onto the background. The die moved a little in my Gemini Junior, but it's okay. I don't mind that it has a slightly off-centered looking hill. And I'm just going to trim off the excess so I can glue this piece directly to the edge of this cornered die. So that way I have a really nice stitch border around my grass as well as my sky. And before I glue that down, I'm going to bring out my Mowed Lawn Distress Oxide, and I'm going to add some color just to darken up and create a little bit of shadow for this green paper. Now these colors match pretty closely, the ink and the paper, but it still adds a little bit of texture and color and a little bit of shadow to these pieces. So once I'm happy with that, I am going to bring back out my splatter box and place those inside while I wait to splatter. But first I'm going to add Distress Oxide to my tree part, and this time I'm using Lucky Clover because I wanted it to be a darker green for my tree, and I'm making it a little bit heavier on the ink towards the edges of this piece and trying to keep the center a little lighter just to give some depth to my tree. So now that all of my pieces are distressed, I'm going to use that same Lucky Clover as well as some water and my little paintbrush here to splatter on some of this dark green onto the grass and then also onto my tree. Once I'm happy with that and all my ink is used up, I will set those aside to dry. I'm going to clean up my workstation here, and now we're going to move on to the interactive part of this card. I have my No-See Kinetic die set, the basics, as well as my straight basics die set to create a moving mechanism behind my tree for one of my squirrels. So I need to figure out where I'm going to die cut the slider piece from my basic straight set. So I'm working on my layout, making sure I have my tree in the right spot, as that's where the slider piece is going to hide behind. And I have my little boy sitting down on the grass and my top of my tree to make sure I know where the start and bottom of my slider needs to be. And I'm going to choose this squirrel that looks like he's already climbing the tree, and to show him going up and down the tree. My other little squirrel, as you can see, will sit kind of by his legs on the tree roots. So once I have the placement and the available space, I'm taking out my smallest of my basic straight dies and figuring out where it's going to die cut onto my blue cardstock. So I'm just using cement tape to help keep that in place, kind of like a hinge, and then sliding everything else out. And then I will use this piece and run it through my die cut machine. I'm just trimming off the excess blue tape unnecessarily and getting it stuck to my mat, but it's fine. I die cut it, and there we have where my piece will be sliding that will control my squirrel. So now I need my two little circles as well as the piece that will be moving, and I die cut the two circles out of some blue cardstock, so just in case they did peek out, they would match that background. And the piece that will attach to my squirrel and be the part that moves, I did it out of some acetate because I wasn't sure how much of it would show behind the squirrel, and I thought acetate would be better than trying to trim a piece of paper down to hide perfectly behind the squirrel. I'm going to glue down my grass piece, my little grass hill, directly to my background. As you can see, I got a lot of glue, so I'm just using that same scrap paper to kind of help me maneuver that around like a brush, and I'm going to glue that down to my blue background. And once that's done, I need to look at how I'm going to place the second piece of grass, and I'm going to pop that up using my 1/4 inch foam tape from scrapbook.com. I'm just putting a little piece on the bottom and layering that to my card. My tree is going to hide perfectly just behind those grass blades and also cover the hole where my straight kinetic die set, my little slot is cut. So now I've added some foam tape to the bottom of my tree, and now I need to make sure I place foam tape around the slot that will also support my tree piece. I make the mistake of attaching my tree a little too early, so I recommend getting all of your foam in place before peeling up the release paper and sticking down your tree. I had to maneuver things around a little bit, and I should have been more patient, but that's okay. So I'm working on the placement, making sure my foam tape is in a good spot, and I want to make sure the foam tape is hidden completely by my tree, even though I know it will be behind the dark green portion of my tree, but I want it to make sure that my squirrel will be moving along the tree and will have a stopper at the top and bottom to make sure it doesn't get stuck behind any of the other die cut pieces or images on the card. So I have my stopper at the top, and now I need to work on my stopper on the bottom, which I realized I should have done before adhering the tree down, but that's okay. I can kind of gently pull it up and it's fine. It's a little bend to it, but you can't tell. So I peeled that up, add the bottom stopper real quick with that foam tape, peeled off the release paper, and then secured my tree down. So next is the squirrel. Now normally to use this die, you would just fold on a score line and you can adhere the part that you want to move, but my acetate is kind of thick and I'm having a hard time keeping it folded without it popping up, and I didn't want my squirrel to be flying off my card. So I thought, what if I just wrap it around the tree? As you can see here, I'm like, oh, I think I could use another score line and fold and then wrap it around my tree, so then I'll have to worry about my squirrel popping off my card. So I trimmed off the excess, peeled up that tree again, and I'm going to wrap around the clear acetate. I'm going to use some really strong double-sided sticky tape. I have a 1/4 inch tape here along the piece of acetate that will hide behind my tree. and create kind of a wrap around the tree. So I'm putting 2 pieces there, and I'm going to peel off the release paper, and I'm going to adhere it to the part that is secured to those blue circles. So it will stick to the blue circle, nothing is sticking to the tree, and that way it will freely slide up and down the tree. I hope that made sense. If you are completely confused on what I'm doing, let me know in the comments and I will do my best to explain via words instead of verbally. So now that it's there, I'm making sure that it doesn't get stuck, that it will go around my tree just fine. It's stopping at the top and stopping at the bottom stopper. So now I can finish adhering the rest of the die cuts and images to my card. I'm going to be using that same foam tape, so I have the same amount of thickness from the grass to the top of my tree, and adhering that to the top of the card. And now it looks like a nice tree, that it has my leaves on it and not just a weird stump. So now I'm going to work on adhering my squirrel. I have an 1/8 of an inch thick double-sided adhesive that is super strong, and I am going to put a couple of pieces of that behind my squirrel and secure that to my acetate. I want to make sure this is nice and stuck, as this will be the piece that the card receiver will be moving, since this part of the card is interactive. So once I get that release paper pulled up, I'm sticking it to the acetate, and I'm going to move it up and down again to make sure there's no issues with my slider, and it seems to be moving pretty well, and I'm pretty happy about that. Now I'm going to attach my little boy from the Zachary set, and I am going to pop him up as well, and the squirrel will be sitting on the left of him with some foam tape, and that's just so he is flush with the tree. So the foam tape is just going on the top, and then I'm going to use a little wet glue on the bottom, as the squirrel is going to be sitting on that root of the tree. So I am going to adhere him down just in case Zachary has to layer in front of him. So now I'm going to use some thinner foam dimensionals than my foam tape I've been using, so I'm not adding too much more bulk to my card. And I'm just going to add a bunch of these little foam adhesives behind him, pull off all the release paper from these dimensionals, and then place him in front of the tree. I was pretty happy with how he turned out. I think his weird little dirt patches on him don't look too weird. I don't know. Let me know in the comments. Does it look like he's dirty, or does it look like I did a terrible job at coloring? Either way, you won't hurt my feelings. It's fine. So now I'm going to adhere this whole entire piece to a card base. I cut a card base out of some Neenah cardstock in a craft color, which I believe is called Desert Sand, but it has a really nice craft look to the paper. I have cut it down to create a 3.5 by 8.5 card when scored. I applied a ton of foam tape behind my image. I used a bunch of random pieces from my 2-inch and my 1/4 inch foam tape, and I'm adhering that to the center of my card base. I thought the craft would look really nice and complement the green and blue of this card. So once everything is secure, I of course have to double check my mechanism, and my squirrel is still sliding well. I'm going to bring out my bone folder just to really help reinforce that crease on my card base, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. And I wanted to add a sentiment, so I cleaned up my workstation and pulled out a sentiment from the Simple Sentiment Strips stamp set. I have also die cut 2 strips from the Simple Sentiment die set that match really well with the sentiments from the stamp set. So I am going to break it up into 2 because it will not fit widthwise on my card. So I stamped half of the sentiment sending smiles, and then I'm going to stamp the other one across the miles. So now I'm imagining my little boy is probably not thinking about snack time. He's probably thinking about his friend who he hasn't seen in a while, and he just wants to send some smiles because he misses them. I'm going to pop these up with those same dimensionals that I use for my little boy, and that way it will have the same thickness across the card. I'm adding dimensions to across the mile, and then I realize I probably should also have sending smiles ready, so that way I know exactly how to center it and space it out onto my card. So I attached one, and now I'm going to attach the other one. And that will complete my card. I hope you enjoyed the process of making this fun interactive card. I really love the new products from Whimsy Stamps. You can find a link down below to the Whimsy Stamps channel to check out all of the new releases today, as well as everything that I used to create this card. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you'll click that like button if you like the tutorial, and if you're new to my channel, I really hope you'll hit that subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.